So let's hear from our first speaker, Emily Brown. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, let me also stop sharing here. And I'm going to ask you to Emily, are you about ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So when Emily speaks, let's go into speaker mode so that we can focus on Emily. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, I'm excited to introduce Emily Brown. She is giving her third speech in the innovative planning curriculum with a focus on researching and presenting. Emily will challenge each of us to examine the power of words. Many of us had heard the saying, life and death is in the power of the tongue. But is that really true? Today, Emily will share a few examples of words and how they affect water crystals that will leave you flabbergasted. She is a former educator of private, public, and homeschool. She continues her love of learning as a lifelong student, discovering new things in life and challenging herself to dip outside her comfort zones and stay there. She hopes you will discover new power in your words today. So Emily Brown, the power of words, Emily Brown.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished Toastmasters, and guests. The power of words. Is life and death truly in the power of the tongue? Do you remember the saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me? If you remember that, let me see your reaction on the screen with a thumbs up. We've lived long enough to know that that statement is definitely not true. As a matter of fact, many of us can remember carrying around negative words throughout our life that were not true, and they bruised us. They caused us to develop self-doubt and low self-esteem. Today, I want to share with you some research from a Japanese researcher, Masaru Emoto, about how water affects human thought and emotion. Dr. Emoto discovered that water molecules change when they are exposed to different outside influences. Once the water molecule is exposed to the outside influence, such as words, music, prayer, or in some cases, nothing at all, he then froze the water and looked at it under the microscope. So I want to share with you a few pictures of what these molecules look like with these outside influences. Give me a second to share my screen with you. First, when we look at this, we're going to see molecules of words.
To share screen.
Okay, bear with me for just a second here. The first words we see here that were affected, the water molecule, was when self-love was said to the water. Then beauty, passion, good job, well done, rescue, and then the word happiness. The next slide shows us the word love, peace, thank you, and then you notice I will kill you is strikingly different from the other molecules. Also, we see an example of how music affected the water. Mozart's Symphony and John Lennon's Imagine. The very far right, we see two examples, a before and after picture of the Fujiwara Dam, which is in Japan. There was an example, a water sample taken of the water before and after prayer. The bottom picture of the after prayer is when one priest, he prayed on the water for about an hour near the dam. And then that's the second sample that was taken. The next slide is an example of "You fool" and "You make me sick." I'd like to share another example with you. And the next set of pictures will show you how religious content changed and the water crystals were arranged with a Christian prayer, a Buddhist prayer, and a Muslim prayer. The final example that I wanted to share with you is Dr. Emoto's work shows as he placed 3 beakers with rice and water. Every day for 1 month, he said to beaker 1, "Thank you." And we see that's the top example here. And that beaker began to ferment and give off sweet, pleasant aroma. For beaker number 2, he said, "You're idiot." And after 1 month, he reported that that rice turned black. For the final beaker, he ignored it totally and said nothing to it for a month. And he reported that that rice turned green and began to rot. Dr. Emoto concluded that this work was a great lesson for us regarding children. We should take care of them by talking to them and nurturing them. He also concluded that showing indifference to children can do great harm. So finally, where does this leave us at today? I think it offers to us the potential to change our lives. Water makes up over 70 to 75% of our bodies. And if thoughts and words and music can change the structure of water, imagine those thoughts and words, what they can do to us and for us. When the water was impacted in a positive way, the water molecules seemed to form some symmetry or ring that came together in some way. On the other hand, when the molecules seem to be affected negatively, they seem to separate and splatter with very little unity. The positive influences created on the water made a more beautiful crystal. I was flabbergasted to see the similarities and the differences. Since we're made up over 70 to 75% of water in our bodies, I ask you, fellow Toastmasters, is this proof that we are affected by our own thoughts? And every time we speak to each other? Does Dr. Emoto give us a tangible example demonstrating the power of prayer and the importance of words and affirmation? I hope I have challenged you today to think about these encounters with each other. In my humble opinion, I think that we underestimate the power of words. And we think about how we truly encounter one another from here on. I will post for you, for those of us that want more information, Dr. Emoto's information in the chat box. Thank you very much, Madam Toastmaster.
Although I know you said Madam Toastmaster, I'm going to say Mr. Guest Speaker.
Thank you so
Guest
much.
Speaker.
That's okay. You did the right thing. Madam Toastmaster is the right conclusion to have said at the end. Emily, thank you so much. I'm now going to ask Deshaun, would you please take Derek Kimbrough and ask him to go into a separate room? And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask the timer, once they get out to that separate room, and Deshaun, I'm going to ask you to be able to tell us what the when that happened. I'm going to ask the timer to give us 7 minutes because we're going to have a facilitated conversation about Emily's speech.
Eric is in the silent room.
Okay, excellent. So it's a little difficult for me. I'm looking off to the side at my view. What I'm going to ask is if you have an observation, simply to speak out. But I'm going to ask you to remember observation, reaction, and suggestion. And let me give you an example. My observation was that when Emily spoke, she had a light behind her that darkened her face. As a result, it was difficult for me to see her facial expressions, and I felt somewhat disconnected during her speech. My recommendation is to make sure that when she's speaking, the light is in front of her rather than behind her. Was that a clear example for everyone of observation, reaction, suggestion?
Yes.
Who'd like to try?
I can try one, Stan. This is Matthew Croak.
Okay.
Emily, when you started to present your premise about connecting the power of water, power of words to the power of water, I immediately felt connected because, you know, I don't live near the ocean. And for a strange reason, when I would go to the ocean, and I'm going to embarrass myself, I would sometimes find myself talking to the ocean. So I felt immediately connected on what your speech was going to be about. I would have liked to have heard a personal story on the way either the water or the words, that connection impacted your life. Mr. Speaker.
Okay, good. That was a good example of the model. Next, someone else, just speak out.
I'll go next. This is Becky. Emily, when you went to share the slide, there was a pause, or there was some time that it took you to get the slide ready. And during that time, I felt some disconnection or even a little impatience. And my suggestion for you is to ask someone else to do the slide or any visuals so that you don't have to worry about speaking and doing the slides at the same time.
Okay, so observation, reaction, and suggestion. Nicely done. Now, who's next? Somebody speak out for me.
This is Anita. I will go. I observed that Emily did great research with her speech. It seems as if she dug in very deep and got a lot of information with her speech. I felt very connected, very shocked to the information that was being given to me, because never really think about the way water and molecules really form with the words and things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And my only suggestion would be to give a personal story of maybe how she have maybe tried that whole experiment herself and did a little bit with it. But overall, I thought it was great.
Thank you very much, Anita. That's excellent. That's a good start. I have one suggestion, and I heard in your response something where you made it seem as if you didn't want to offend the speaker by your suggestion. one of the words that you used. I can't remember which specific word it was, but it was something like just. Let me have a couple more, please.
I'll go. Hey, Emily, this is Kareem. One thing that I noticed is that as soon as you were talking about the water molecule, I felt so connected. As a martial artist, one of my favorite quotes is when he says, "Be formless like water." And so I heard you bring up the water molecule. I was instantly interested in the topic that you spoke about. So you gave a very detailed and informative speech. One thing that I also observed is during your slides, when you were showing some examples, I noticed a lot of information on one slide. And it kind of made me difficult to see what information that you were talking about because there was so much information in one slide. So one thing that I recommend is that when you are talking about a certain slide or a certain topic, try to, in a way, show that one slide, because on Google Slide, there's a way where you can transform the slide for each of them to pop up one at a time, so that when you do talk about a certain topic, it's easier for the audience to know which one you're talking about specifically, so that we can follow through with you throughout the whole speech and we understand which one you're talking about. Either way, it was an amazing speech. Water is my favorite, so good job.
Okay, now we're not looking for a whole evaluation, just the 3 points, okay? Observation, reaction, and suggestion. So and I heard what Kareem was saying. Are you talking about the pictures of the 8 pictures?
Yes.
And so it would have been helpful to have a little bit more specificity when you showed the 8 different pictures or the 6 different pictures of words that were said. It was difficult for me to follow which one you were talking about. It would have helped me if you had put a single word on a slide and showed each slide in succession. Okay, great suggestion. Need to tighten it up. I need one more. Are we at the 5-minute mark, Kareem?
6 minutes now.
6?
Yes.
Okay.
This
One
is
more,
Joyce,
please.
Joyce Young. I would like to do an evaluation or my observation. I was instantly drawn into her speech just by the title, The Power of Words. I have heard that a lot in these last few years of my adult life. And so my reaction to that, to the slides, it made a visual connection, because I know the power of words. There's truth in that, and then to have those visuals really brought it home for me. As a matter of fact, I've already decided I'm gonna do this research and present it to tell other people about it, because this is really important. And I was struggling to give this because I don't know the suggestion part. I don't have anything for that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. One of the challenges is, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, of having a repertoire of suggestions. Okay, Deshaun, would you go in and check and see if our evaluator is ready to make his 2 to 3 minute presentation? While that's happening, can we get one more piece of feedback?
Yes, this is Mercy.
Okay,
and
Mercy, go ahead.
For my evaluation, I observed that Emily gave a very beautiful speech. However, her camera wasn't centralized, so the focus on the image is kind of cut off from the middle. So it puts in a reaction whereby she's shoving herself aside, like probably she's not so certain what she's going to say, but everything she said was beautiful. It was beautiful. So it's kind of like, shaky, her confidence. Maybe she's not so confident with the camera, so she's trying to be aside. So That's my reaction, that she's trying to hide something or hide a feeling or something. And then my suggestion is that she tries to centralize her camera, and then her audience will be moved with every whatever speech she's giving. Yeah, she should just centralize.
So let me see if I understand what you mean by that. Do you mean that she was off center from her camera?
Yes, she was, and she still is.
Okay. So you want her to be more directly to look her, have her face directly into the camera,
Yes,
as with
yes, and
mine
she,
is right now.
yes, now she's
That
gotten it
would have
right.
that would have helped make a better connection, like you
Yes,
just
yes.
done, Emily. Very good. Okay.
All right then.
Deshaun, have you gotten our speaker, our evaluator back yet?
The evaluator is back, Derek. You are there, aren't you?
I'm sorry, my mic was off. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, Derek. So please do a 2 to 3 minute evaluation, and we'll see what you saw and how it compares to what we talked about. Please, everybody go to speaker view so we can see Derek. Derek, can you see your timer?
No, I can't. That's what I'm trying to do real quickly.
Okay, no problem.
Timer, speak up.
Timer, say something so Derek can get you on a picture.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm good. Okay, Mr. Guest Speaker, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests, but most importantly to Emily. Emily, thank you so much for providing us that speech today, The Power of Words. What I'd like to do real quickly in this time is definitely tell you some of the things that I thought you really excelled at, share some observations, and provide a quick suggestion on something that I think if you really do, it'll take your speech to the next level. Emily, your speech definitely provided what the platform that you were on provided that for us. It was research and presenting, and you clearly provided us research and you presented that. So let me talk a little bit about that. So first off, right off the bat, you pulled the audience in, and you pulled us in by asking us questions and actually asking us to interact with you. You had us to use our reaction features, and you hit us with 2 quick questions that actually had us to think about the power of the tongue and actually the words that come out of our mouth. So kudos for actually bringing us into your actual speech and the process that was going on. I will say right off the bat, I knew very little about water crystals, and you clearly started that conversation for us so that we can learn a little more about what water crystals are. So definitely thank you for that. It's clear as day in your introduction, it was mentioned that you were an educator and you took time to actually educate us through this process of learning more about water crystals and how actually this can, our words, our music, and things like that can actually assist in our thinking. So definitely thank you for that. I will say prior to the speech, I've had a brief conversation with you via email asking for some things that you wanted me to kind of look out for. And 2 things that you said that clearly stuck out to me, and you did a decent job, were to actually relax and be relatable. And I will say let me give you an example of definitely where I saw that you were relaxed. Now, for me, it would have been a struggle, but quickly at the beginning of your speech, when you actually went to the point of actually sharing your screen with us, it was a process that took a moment, but throughout that process, I saw your face and I saw your patience, and you even hit us with the point of actually being patient during that process. So that right there shows me that the relaxed piece is something that you're growing into, and that was one perfect example where you did that. An observation and a suggestion that I say in concluding to what you actually did today is that towards the conclusion of your speech, you hit us with a couple of questions. And one question in particular that stood out, you said, is this proof that we are affected by our thoughts? You hit us with that question, and it was a very thought-provoking question. I will say to you right there, that's a great opportunity for you to actually add some variety to your voice, or maybe actually be more deliberate, and that was a point that you could have done that. Overall, I think you did a great speech. Thank you so much. I'm actually looking forward to hearing more from you and seeing the more relaxed and relatable Emily come out that we clearly saw today. Mr. Guest Speaker.
Oh, wait. Thank you very much, Mr. Evaluator. I'm going to ask in a little bit about the evaluator's feedback process and what they've done, what they felt was different or the same as how they've performed in the past. I seem to be out of sync. I hope this gets better in a little bit. Let's take a look at our next speaker. Our next speaker is Jerome Rowley. At the start of level 2, you are asked to explore your leadership style. Rather than describe my leadership style using the terms used by Toastmasters and Pathways, I will tell a story about how my leadership style came to fore when leading the project of a family celebration for my father. Speech title is, When Life is Fragile, You Gotta Get Agile. Jerome Rowley, please, let's welcome Jerome Rowley with our applause.
Welcome, Toastmasters and guests. As Stan explained, I'm here to explain my leadership style. In Pathways, you're asked to do a survey, and I came across the democratic style is the one that fits my personality the most. Now, as many of you who know me, that's probably not surprising, but it helped me understand why I was attracted as a project manager to a form of project management called Agile. Agile is, as the name implies, something which is a project management style that can react to changing circumstances, and it's very democratic in that all members have a lot of autonomy and freedom. So, let me explain what this project was. My father was going to have his birthday, but he asked to go to a Middle Eastern restaurant. The problem was when we went there, it was very cramped, and we thought since now he had to go in a wheelchair, it wouldn't be a good party if we had it there. So we asked them to bring it to our house and cater it. He was excited by that. I remember he said, well, can they get one of those dancing girls to go as well? And his caretaker, Lacola, said to him, well, we'll talk about it later. But behind his back, she gave her best Lori Lightfoot imitation to say that that was not on the menu. Well, approaching the date, I was the project manager for this because, you know, I'm the project manager and my family elected me to run it. About a week beforehand, he was starting to have pains in his side. And so we took him to the doctor and they said it was his gallbladder, which wasn't surprising since he had problems with that before. We took him to the hospital and they said this time it was really serious. So they were going to have to remove his gallbladder, which at the age of 87 is a risky proposition. But since no surgeons were ready, we were going to have to wait the entire weekend for a surgeon to be available on Monday. Well, on Saturday, I went in and Lacola said the problem for him is not pain management, it's boredom management because his mind is still active. So since he was a former newspaper reporter for Sun Times, I decided to go down to the gift shop and get him a newspaper. But I decided when I got there to the room, I would present it to him on a tray as if I were his butler, Jeeves. And the nurse gave me even a vase and a flower to put on there. So when he received it, he was very happy. And then he played the role that he sat up in his bed like he was the Lord of the Manor, and he said, I'll remember you in the will. And Nicole said, well, don't be talking about no will at a time like this, Mr. Rowley. And he said, oh, you're right, and then winked at me. The next day, Sunday, I thought, well, I'll bring the Sunday paper. That'll keep him involved the whole day. I got to the car and then brought my planning notebook and remembered, what am I supposed to remember to bring? Oh, the Sunday paper. Well, what happened then was my sister called, and then I thought she was going to tell me to remind me to bring the paper. Oh, hey, Nora, I was just on my way to the, oh my God. Oh, when did this happen? About half an hour ago? Oh. Well, I was on the way to the hospital anyway, so I guess I'll meet you there. Well, I drove to the hospital. I don't know how I got there, but the nurse had said that she was taking care of the patient in the bed next to him. And she heard my dad cry out. And she opened the curtain, and he said, he was like reaching out in bed as if he was reaching out to somebody. He said the name Dorothy, which just happens to be my mother's name. And then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he fell back, and he was gone. I mean, it was his heart valve that went. So now I had my Sunday paper, which was now he was never going to read, and my notebook for the planning of his birthday. And I realized I had to be agile and change it to a plan for a funeral now. Well, my sister came in and she, visited with my father. And then she asked me, well, what are you writing? And I told her, it was the plan for his funeral. And she said, can I look at it? And I said, sure. And in my sister's true fashion, instead of saying you missed a spot, she said, can I add to the plan? Then when my younger brother came in, he added to the plan. And then my older brother, he added to it as well when we sent it off to him in California. Each of us had written a part of the plan that was specifically geared to what we were expert at. My sister with the cooking, my brother with the legal and financial stuff. I was taking care of the communications, and my brother, the artist in the family, took care of the flowers, etc. By doing this in a very democratic way, we not only made a celebration for my father, but also kind of cemented our relationship as siblings. So I can conclude that it was a very democratic forum that we used, and it was very effective. However, it required a bedrock of trust. And that is something which is the subject of Stan's seminar today, which is creating a relationship of trust between the speaker and the evaluator. And that concludes my presentation. Oh, and one more thing. He did remember me in the will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerome. Okay, so we have Anthony who's going to be doing the evaluation. Deshaun, could you put Anthony into an outside room?
Actually, I am going to do that for you, Stan, since Deshaun is on his way to his next meeting.
Okay, no problem.
Anthony, here we go. He is now there.
Wonderful. So now we saw a number of, when we saw their second presentation, you've gotten the idea of observation, reaction, and suggestion. What observations do you have? So who'd like to volunteer with a first observation?
Stan, I'd like to speak first. This is Mutiat. I am so pleased that I got to see the fullness of Jerome Rowley. I've been watching this guy for a long time, from a shy, reserved, unsure of himself speaker who would give his speeches regardless as to what type of speech it was, in the same monotone with slight hand gestures and body movement throughout. Jerome got me as soon as he opened his mouth. I was able to observe a speaker who has grown leaps and bounds over the years. I felt that his lighting was very effective. His use of his camera was very effective. We were there with you, Jerome, and you were there with us.
Hold on, I'm just looking for a specific thing, not a whole evaluation.
Okay.
So focus on one observation, please.
I'm just bubbling over, Stan. I'm sorry. This was just, it
Okay,
just
so
caught me.
talk
So
about his camera presence, which is
his
one of the
camera
things that you
presence
noted.
was on point. His gestures, his body language, his use of language. One more thing.
Okay, so what specifically did you see about his body language that you thought was effective?
When he talked about, I'll say, being left in the wheel and he lifted his glasses, that was a very good gesture.
What was your reaction to that gesture?
I was just shocked. I was shocked by everything he did.
Okay, I'm asking you to be specific now. Okay, you've given me a big broad piece.
It was a mouth dropping situation.
Okay.
My mouth dropped.
And what would your suggestion be?
For Jerome, I would say continue what you're doing. Everything I saw today touched me in a phenomenal way, and that's why I had to speak about it.
Okay, so I want to be clear here. This is not a big, long evaluation that we're doing. We're going to hear that in a little bit. What we're looking for is snippets, okay? So Jerome's gestures, so here's how I might suggest you do that. When I saw Jerome look down over his glasses as if he were his father, I could feel the look his father gave and felt connected to his reaction to his father. Okay?
Okay.
I suggest that you look for other ways to personify the characters in your stories so that I can connect to them.
Okay. Thank you, Stan.
Okay? So that's what we're looking for, is just a snippet of what is your observation about one thing, then what is your reaction to that, and then what suggestion do you have? Who else would like to try? And I know this is, I've been doing this for a long time. This is not easy to do.
Hi, this is Charmaine. I would like to try.
Please go ahead.
I observed in Jerome's speech where he talked about being a project manager, and in my field of work, I'm surrounded by project managers. So I observed and I appreciated, for those who aren't familiar, how he explained the different types. I liked throughout the story how in the speech, he really took us on a journey about his father. I recommend him working a little bit more on the transition, because he started off talking about the project management, and when he started to talk about his dad, the party and being in the hospital, I was a little bit lost of how he got there. So I really just would work a little bit better on transitioning into actually getting us to the story. But I really enjoyed the speech, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, so we keep wanting to give a whole evaluation. So here's what I heard you saying. What you heard was, I appreciated the story about what I heard you say was, I appreciated the story about project management, but I was confused, or I was distracted by the transition from project management to talking about your father. That's your reaction, right? And so I recommend that you work on making the transition smoother so that I understand where you're going and where you came from.
Yes.
Okay. Let's do one more.
I have one, Stan. I'll try it. Hey, Jerome, when you brought your phone up to your ear, I immediately paid more attention because you broke the pattern of just sitting there. And especially during Zoom and what we're faced with, I would encourage to find little props like that, because we can't move. Find more opportunities for that to keep the audience engaged.
So the only thing I didn't hear was your reaction.
What did I say? I thought oh, you're right. I should have said I smiled. I meant to say I smiled.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So now there would be a reaction to what you observed, and you recommended that he continue to look for props that would increase the vividness of his presentation. How much time? We got 1 more minute left. Is that right, Mr. Timer? Let's do one more piece of feedback. Who'd like to go?
It appears as if we don't have anyone.
No guts, no glory.
This is Deborah Blackman Parish.
Go ahead, Deborah.
You were effective with giving us a description of your sister's personality and your dad's personality, especially when explaining the type of the funeral arrangements. I observed your facial and hand suggestions, which drew me in to give me a better explanation of what you were saying and how you felt about that. I felt that you were ineffective with the way you changed your subject area in your speech, because I felt you were talking about one thing and then went to another. So my suggestion would be to try to figure out some transitional words that would take you from one thing to the other.
Okay, Deborah, I want to challenge you for a second.
Okay.
You said that he was good in describing his sister and his father's personality. What specifically did he do that caused you to feel that way?
When he talked about his sister, and she changes things, but this time she wanted to add or accentuate what he had already written.
So what was your reaction when he talked about that? Did you feel better connected to the, could you imagine the traits of the sister? What was the reaction?
My reaction was, that sounds like something that my family would be going to, especially right now.
Okay, good. So you related to it because it sounded like how something your family was going through. Great, that means the connection worked. And the recommendation would be around what specifically? So build more characters, give me more details about the characters so that I can connect them to my own life. Those are the kinds of things we're looking for in recommendation. So again, looking for a specific observation, a specific reaction, and a specific recommendation, rather than this observation and this observation and this observation and this observation.
Thank you.
Okay. Is our evaluator back in the room?
Let me do that now.
Okay. Folks, I recognize that this is a challenge to do things this way because we're taught to do a 3-minute evaluation. We think we have to do the whole thing. All I'm trying to do is to get us to learn the OR process: observation, reaction, suggestion, so that ultimately we can put all those together in a 3-minute evaluation.
Great. Mr. Speaker, our evaluator is back in the room.
Okay. Mr. Timer, please, Mr. Evaluator, can you see the timer?
Not yet. There he is.
Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, guest speaker, fellow Toastmasters, guests, and of course, Jerome. I really felt a connection with your speech because not only was it a story, but it was a story about family. There's many different stories that we have about family, but yours was unique. It was about the passing of your father. Now that can be a little bit of a difficult thing to talk about to a group of Toastmasters, but let's just first start off by saying it went over very well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I thought about your speech. So let's jump right in. The first thing that I observed is that you used very natural hand motions. You had one of my favorites, the Lori Lightfoot with the arms crossed. Another one that you used was the dancing girls. My reaction to those was quite inspirational, I guess. I knew exactly what you were talking about, and it really hit home. So my recommendation would be simply to continue using those natural hand gestures that you have. It's certainly one of your better parts of your speeches. Now, the next thing that I observed for you is that when you were talking about your father, specifically about whether or not he needed that surgery and how risky it would be for an 87-year-old, my reaction to that part of the speech was a little bit more on the inquisitive side. Whenever somebody's talking about something being risky, I would think that they might slow their tone a little bit. They might become a little bit more guarded. Because with risk, we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know how we can portray what risk is. A suggestion for you to portray risk moving forward would simply be to maybe, number one, slow the pace of your speech so that you're the audience is hanging on everything you say, but also to lower your tone as well. It was a risky procedure and we weren't sure what could happen. That's going to have a very effective, a great effect on your audience. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is when I observed how you got the phone call. It was pretty amazing to see you pull out a cell phone because it took us into the moment. One of the things that I was specifically observing about that situation was when we were waiting to hear what happened. The audience didn't know for a good 20 to 30 seconds what happened on that phone call. My reaction to that was that I got stuck on the phone call. I didn't know. Thankfully, you did tell us. One suggestion I would have for you is to maybe reword that part of your speech to include the news immediately. That way we as an audience can hear how you digested that situation. That is the meat and potatoes right there. That's the good stuff. With that said, I hope you take those suggestions that I gave seriously and use them in your next speech. And I look forward to hearing your next speech, of course, Mr. Guest Speaker.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. So we've gotten a couple examples and we see that this is a difficult thing to do because we often don't have specific suggestions that we can make. I seem to be out of sync. Am I out of sync with you? And as you look at this, Cassandra, would you tell me?
Slightly on my end, Stan. You seem to be okay. Keep talking. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the slides instead of to me, because I'm going to have a couple more pieces of slides and then we'll wrap up. I'm also going to suggest that if you leave the link open after the meeting, I'm happy to continue to take questions or suggestions or whatever afterwards. Let me can you all see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that has to happen for one to become really good at giving feedback is to build a repertoire of recommendations. You don't learn how to give feedback immediately. It happens over time. It happens that there are many resources and continuing to build resources on the TI website with Pathways Video. And quite frankly, if you can get a hold of an old copy of a CC manual, each one of those has some very specific suggestions on each of those building blocks. And if you can't find one legally, I'm sure there are bootleg PDFs out there somewhere on the web. The other thing to do to build your repertoire is to listen to the recommendations of other evaluators. Over time, you pick up those ideas. Just as I said to you that when I originally had thought about putting your hands behind the back, I called it a reverse fig leaf. When someone gave me the suggestion to call it handcuffs, I said, that's great. That's a much more descriptive word. And now I've added that to my repertoire. You can also there we go, sorry. You can also do independent research. There are a ton of articles and books about presenting that are out there. These days, podcasts are really wonderful, as are YouTube videos. You know, One of the things that I learned from Prez Vasilev, who was the 2013 international speech winner internationally, was the ability to go look at speeches on YouTube and actually practice giving feedback. Be careful though, because not all sources are equally good. Here are a few of them that I found are particularly good. One's called the pin drop principle. And then there's actually this book called the Magic of Speech Evaluation, in which the author looks at TED speeches that are online and gives you feedback about them. But these are not the only ones by any way, shape, or form. This is just a quick list of what I did by doing a quick search on Amazon about speech feedback. So as you can see, there are plenty of things that are out there. I also recommend that one of the things that you do is to create a notebook. Prez, one of the things I really admired about Prez when he won the international speech contest is that every meeting he went to and every speech he heard, he took notes. And when he ever heard something that he liked, he made sure to keep track of it. And over time, he got a really good book of ways that he could be effective, improve his evaluations. One of the things that is important to do is to take extensive notes during the speech. You can't remember everything that you saw, so make sure to keep track of what's transpiring during the speech so you can have specific examples that you can talk about. So for example, when we just saw Anthony was really good about modeling the things that he saw, and he probably had to take notes about the dance and the cell phone so that he could remember to reference it when he came back to it. It's important to practice giving evaluations. One of the things you can do, as I said, is go to YouTube. Always take the advantage of going to other clubs, especially these days where we are at on Zoom, and we can go to clubs literally all over the planet. And obviously look at the evaluation contest. I don't know if District 103 is going to have one. I know that we're going to have one this year for District 30. Finally, I've got just a couple more. I'm going to run about 5 minutes over, and I've checked with the Toastmasters. She said that's okay. I like to tell you to avoid low-value evaluations, and I'll give you some examples of low-value evaluations. One of them is repeat and report. Repeat and report is, well, you know, I heard you give your presentation about going to France, and you said how you went to the Louvre, and then you had lunch on the Champs-Élysées, and then how you visited the top of the Eiffel Tower. You don't need to report the speech. We were there. We heard it. We talked earlier about the sandwich evaluations not being a good thing. Another one you have to be careful of is relate and debate. You know, you gave your speech about the importance of voting. I'll tell you, I don't think voting is very important. And don't argue with the speaker. Make sure that you talk about what helps what helps the speech be better or not better based on your reactions. Whitewash evaluations. We Toastmasters really want to support our fellow members, and we want to tell them they did a good job. But you do not help them when you say things like, I can't think of anything to help you to improve. At that point, the member might say, well, why am I here? On the other hand, there's an even worse one, which is doom and gloom. You know, that was the worst speech I've ever heard. I am weak. I have wasted more time on that speech than I think is appropriate. My life is less valuable now because of the speech that you just gave. Don't do that one either. And finally, I think that rating systems are things that really do not do as well. And this is where you notice I say shame on UTI. You'll notice that in all the evaluation forms for these projects for pathways, there's a 1 to 5 scale on each one of the criteria that are used. The problem is that your 5 and my 5 might be very different, or your 2 and my 2 might be very different. And so these rating systems are not the best way to give feedback to the speaker. I think it's important to actually share information in a 2 to 3 minute evaluation, and then have a conversation, not just numbers on a page. So please avoid these low value evaluations. Just a final piece here. You are never going to be perfect. And you can, by the way, use the ORS method even for the general evaluator. Remember, not everyone wants coaching. Sometimes people don't, or just want to give speeches and don't really want feedback. You can also experiment with your club. You notice we had a group feedback process today. That's a good way to give, because different people react different ways. Sometimes when you get a group feedback instead of an individual feedback, what you end up discovering is what worked for one person didn't work for a different person. And so that difference of information helps you evaluate whether it was effective or ineffective. Another thing to do is, like they do with the evaluation contest, assign multiple evaluators for the same speech, and then make sure that the evaluators don't hear each other's evaluation. You'll get some different stuff. Another thing I've seen is to have 1 skill per evaluator. So assign 1 skill of watch about the gestures and another one to talk about voice. By the way, the nice thing about multiple evaluators, if you ever have a case where you don't have enough speakers, by having multiple evaluators, you get just as much value from that meeting. And if you can, keep a club log of suggestions so that you can share it with new members. The most important thing I can say about evaluations is this: the more you practice, the better you'll become, both at evaluating and speaking. Madam Toastmaster,